But keep it, don't send it back.
Yes, sir.
You never know. You might need it. Uh, Kavya, are you here? Kavya,
Yes, sir.
you're here.
Yes, sir.
Wait there. Rachna,
Sir, good evening.
hmm, Rachna,
Sir.
please meet Kavya. Say hello to Kavya. Where are
Oh,
you from, Rachna? Nizamabad? Which
yes,
part?
sir.
Which part?
Darpalli. Darpalli.
Uh-huh.
Darpalli, sir.
Darpalli.
Yeah.
Kavya is also from Nizamabad.
Okay.
Hmm.
Hello, Kavya. Hi, Rachna.
Hmm. You've not met before, no?
No, sir. No.
No, you didn't know that you were both from Nizamabad.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and but both of you knew that my early years of childhood, I grew up there and went to Indoor school. Yeah, and my mother was working in the first, she worked in the Nirmala Hridaya convent,
Yeah, yes, yes.
and after
Subhash
that,
Nagar.
hmm?
Subhash Nagar, sir.
Yeah, we were in Kanteshwar, hmm.
Yes.
And then she worked in the Nizamabad Women's College. Hmm. So, so my first few years were there. So I have a soft corner for anyone who comes from Nizamabad because my earliest memories of life begin in Nizamabad, and I also have a soft spot for anyone who comes from Hanmakonda, Warangal, because that's where my father grew up. He was born and brought up there, and Mehboob Nagar. Okay, so enough of my personal history and all that. Let's get going. Yesterday, I told you that we will be doing. And I seem to have said something else. Does anyone remember what I said when I.
Objectivity about.
Hmm. Fact value dichotomy is in the context of objectivity. Yesterday we were discussing what is objective. I hope you remember. I'm just quickly going to run through that today. I told you that objective knowledge is considered to be that, I mean, it is, or rather, let me put it this way, knowledge is considered to be objective when the focus of the knower, okay, or the one who's trying to know, when that person's focus is on the object, purely on the object that he's trying to know, without any kind of interference of subjective likes and dislikes, and also without the interferences of bias. Okay, likes and dislikes should be technically called uh, prejudice, uh, though to really, to be honest with you, likes and dislikes need not be prejudice. Though that is the how people have started using this in the context of positivism. Okay, likes and dislikes are not prejudices, nor are they biases. Okay, so let's put it this way. If I say, uh, I like something, all right, um, let us, let me look for a good example. All right, I've got a very good example. How does your examination system work now? Somebody teaches you, right? Somebody whom you don't know uh, sets the question paper, and somebody else, somebody else corrects the answer scripts. Okay, that is how the current system of examination that you have is. All right. Why did they create this kind of uh, this examination system? Ostensibly, and I use the word after careful thought, ostensibly, this is to eliminate likes and dislikes of a particular teacher towards his students, coming in the way of evaluation of the scripts, which you, let's say you write at the end of the semester. Okay, that is the reason why this whole uh, process is anonymous, it is opaque, and this was basically to make sure that a student is evaluated purely for what he has written and for no other reason. Now, a few years ago, when I say a few years ago, it's actually many years ago, nearly 45 years ago, the UGC took a decision that there is something seriously wrong with this system of examination. Okay, it took a view that there is something very, very seriously wrong with it. And what was that? What was wrong with it? It basically found that there is no way you could demand accountability from teachers. Suppose half your class failed. Suppose half your class failed. Where would you put the responsibility? Purely on the student. You would put the responsibility purely on the student. Okay? You'll say the student didn't write properly and therefore he must have failed or she must have failed. That is the kind of thing that people would say. Now, nobody here is questioning the teacher who taught. Okay? Nobody is questioning the teacher who taught. Nobody is questioning the person who set the question paper. And nobody is asking one of the many evaluators, as to why certain students have failed. Because there are so many of these people, you don't know where you can apportion the blame for something. You don't know. Okay. And it was in my time when I was doing my graduation, routinely people who wrote side headings, underlined them with some other colored ink, all those people used to get very good marks. And if you wrote an answer as an essay without side headings, because you don't need to put side headings in essay answers, if you wrote answers without side headings, and if you didn't have such a wonderful handwriting, like it was in my case, you would get some arbitrary marks. I might not have failed, but in many instances, or in all instances, I always felt that I got fewer marks than I deserved. That's what I felt. always, until I went to do my MA. In my MA, now don't think that I'm using this as an opportunity to tom my so-called achievement. In my MA, I was the university topper for my batch. And in my MA, there was no evaluation of scripts anonymously. The same teacher, the same teacher who taught you had to evaluate you. And by then, the UGC had introduced a system of actually evaluating the student continuously throughout the semester. So it was called continuous evaluation. So we talk about credits, right? This is a 5 credit course. This is a 4 credit course. Okay. Credits were actually originally all courses were 4 credit courses, and the number of credits were distributed to things such as punctuality and regularity to class, 2 in class performance, which means did you participate in discussions that took place in class? Did you raise questions? Did you answer questions that were raised? Were you attentive in class? Then, how did you fare in what were called the mid-semester sessionals, which were we were encouraged not to write tests as mid-semester sessionals. We were encouraged to pick up different kinds of uh, exercises for ourselves, and we were asked to submit them. So one of the uh, sessionals that was an optional was what was called a semester project. You had to choose the semester project at the beginning of the semester itself, and you had to work on it throughout the semester and submit it, submit a report along with evidence for what you have done with all these, I mean, with the data, how you collected the data. You had to even show all that. and you could submit the project at the end of the semester. And it was not just good enough, and we didn't have a system of marks, we had a system of grades. Now, you people have grades, but they are not really, it is not a proper system of gradation, because what is being done is you people are being given marks first and then converting that mark into a letter grade. Whereas in our case, it wasn't like that. And when I was working in TIS, it was the same system, the one that I went through as a student in my MA days. So we used to have to give a letter grade, which would have a numerical value. And after giving letter grades to various things, then you would put, you would calculate the grade point average, the grade point average by then putting a numerical value. The idea is to bunch up one set of students who are not very dissimilar in performance, put them all under one category. So that is fairness to the student. So if you got an A minus and 5 other people got A minus, it was very rare that we got A's. I was one of the very few people who got, in my batch nobody did, but generally very few people who got 2 A's. A was considered to be really, really rare. And I got 2 of those. And my lowest grade was A minus. Okay. So people were bunched together in A minus. What made me the topper was the fact that I had 2 A's. That's how I became a topper. Right? And I was given this because I also showed innovation, which was another thing that was given a credit. So that is how the credits were calculated. Okay. So now go and ask anybody, what do those 5 credits stand for? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Somebody says this is a system followed in Finland. Somebody says this is a system followed in Holland, but nobody knows what a credit actually stands for. What does it mean when you attribute 5 credits to a course? Anyway, so the point that I'm trying to make, is likes and dislikes are not necessarily prejudicial. They can be judicious. And by the same teacher, rather, if the same teacher who teaches evaluates your scripts and honestly gives you the grade that you deserve, then the accountability is no longer just on the student, but it is also on the teacher, because it is mandatory for the teacher to not just evaluate your scripts at the end semester exam or in the end semester exam. You also have to justify why you have given whatever grade you have given. You have to justify. And the student is given a right to challenge that grade. If a student challenges it, then it is referred to what is actually called a student faculty committee, in which there will be representatives from the student side and there will be representatives from the faculty or the lecturers side, and then there'll be both the student and the teacher, and both will present their picture. So that is how it works actually. Then there's accountability. Then there's accountability. In Usmania, if you say you evaluate, then everybody will get O, outstanding. Hmm? That's because nobody knows anything. By that I mean people who teach. So the best way to keep the student away will be to give a no. Then nobody will come and say, why did you give me such a low grade? There have been instances when students have gone to the teacher and said, what do you know that you are grading me so low? There have been those instances. So that's why this anonymous system. And there is no accountability of anyone. Okay. So the idea is to evaluate continuously, because on a certain day, you might not have, that might not be a good day for you. On a certain day, you might not have written an answer as well as you would otherwise have written. There can be a number of reasons for that. So the continuous evaluation is that it evaluates your potential throughout the semester and will link what you have written to what you have shown as your potential, and not just grade you by what you wrote, but by putting both together. That is the idea. That is supposed to be a fair system, being fair. But unfortunately, we have this system. That's anyway a different issue. So, as a teacher, somebody might like someone who basically is regular, participates in the classroom discussions, initiates classroom discussions, and contributes to the atmosphere of what do we say? uh, contributes to the atmosphere in which a spirit of inquiry and the desire to learn is can grow. Okay, so that's what these things are. So that's why the continuous evaluation, every time a UGC team comes to our university, they ask us, why are you not doing evaluation of your own scripts? I don't know what answers are given, but somehow people get away with it. I have always said I am willing to bring on the biggest thugs. I'm willing to evaluate the scripts and stand by them and stand by the grades that I have given by explaining why I have given that grade. So that should be the process. So that's not prejudicial. Okay. And there should be no gap between what is taught, what is written, and someone else might not know the subject to the same extent as a teacher, or might know the subject a lot more minutely than the teacher. And if that person evaluates, then obviously, where is the objectivity in evaluation? I've given you this example to let you know that knowing a subject whom you are evaluating need not be a subjective thing. It can be objective. It just depends upon your honesty, integrity, and the ability to judge a student. If you have these three qualities, you will objectively evaluate a student. It won't be a biased, prejudiced kind of a thing. So likes and dislikes can be rational, judicious, prejudice. Read it as prejudice, means something that hasn't been given judicious thought, which means you have not understood the different things that need to be understood while you have to perform a task. If you don't have the ability to do so, or if you don't do it because you are lacking in integrity and honesty, then it can become prejudicial. Biases can creep in with identities. If you have the same, so in this whole debate that we have these days about politics of identity, and I stand up and say against politics of identity. Politics of identity are fracturing of society. They break the cohesiveness of people living within a geographical space. And identities can threaten the very existence, or let me put it this way, the assertion of identities can threaten the very basis of social harmony. It can. So, politics of identity shouldn't be encouraged. That's my standpoint. I'm saying that because I'm right now editing a book which is about this politics of identity versus the politics of development. Okay. You say you want inclusive development, but how can you have inclusive development when you take up identities, because identities exclude as much as they include? If you say, I am a Telanganite, then, and if you say that I stand for a separate Telangana, then you are saying that everybody else, every other identity is not worth recognition for me. You are creating the other, the non-Telanganite. You're creating that, the other. So I think I told you once in one of these discussions that K.T. Ramarao was saying the BJP has landed up with all its top brass in Hyderabad for the GHMC elections. They are playing politics of division. They are trying to divide the population. What did you do? What did you do? You did exactly the same thing. So why are you crying when somebody else is threatening to do the same thing to you? What happened when you said Andhra versus Telangana? Was that not divisive? On what basis did you ask for a separate Telangana? Because no other linguistic state basically asked for division. The BJP, a divisive force, was the one that divided Madhya Pradesh into Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, Uttar Pradesh into first Uttaranchal, which now is Uttarakhand, and Uttar Pradesh, and Jharkhand and Bihar. Their rationale was that these people are tribal people. The Chhattisgarh people, people in Uttarakhand were the Pahadis, and Jharkhand was again tribals. So they didn't have access to the capital. So they said, we are going in for smaller states. Nobody asked, by the way, for those states. But people were asking for Telangana. And L.K. Advani, once while boarding a flight in Begumpet airport, when he was asked by a TV reporter, but you agreed to, you were the people who initiated uh, the division of those states. But here you are saying no. And Advani's answer then was that we are saying no because Hyderabad, the capital, is in the middle of Telangana. So you don't need to have a division here. And if you look at the Sri Krishna committee, I talked about that. There is no disparity in levels of development, even when Hyderabad is taken out of the equation of Telangana. Yet it was done. That is the problem with politics of identity. You play it, somebody else will play. You played politics of one kind of identity. Now somebody wants to come and play politics of another kind of identity. Because you can have so many identities. So many identities. Anyway, so what I'm trying to tell you, therefore, is that likes and dislikes need not be considered prejudices or biases. They are different, completely different. Biases are usually on the basis of identities. Prejudices are also on the basis of identities. Sometimes you don't want to give somebody a fair chance. You don't want to give somebody a fair chance simply because you hold a certain opinion about a certain category of people. Some people don't let out their houses to people who belong to other religions simply because you don't like those people in terms of identities. You have not analyzed them and seen if they are good people or bad people. You just decided you don't like them. But unfortunately, what has happened is likes and dislikes have got lumped with prejudices because the expression of prejudice and bias is done through showing a liking or a dislike. So that is how they have got associated together. Otherwise, they need not be. They need not be lumped together. They have got lumped together simply because of the fact that there is no other way of expressing a prejudice or a bias. There's no other way of expressing it. You show it as a like or a dislike. So, to get back to the idea of objective knowledge, this is what Auguste Comte and co. were trying to avoid. They were trying to avoid prejudice. They were trying to avoid biases. And they believed that Values are not what can be seen as neutral. Neutral meaning that you don't take a stand on that which is prejudicial or biased. Values are always those which encourage, as far as uh, Auguste Comte is concerned, they encourage a lack of neutrality because of the fact that they are driven by prejudice and by bias. So they are not neutral. So he believed that history is steeped in values. How do you understand value? Somebody tell me this first. If I ask you, what is a value? Hmm?
Which is good for all.
Value is good for all.
Yeah.
That's Rachna, right?
Yes, sir.
Hmm. Rachna says value is something which is good for all. Then why did our good friend Auguste Comte think that they are not neutral? If it is good for all, then it should be a good thing, right?
They are beliefs, sir, which can change from person to person.
Beliefs, what kind of beliefs? See, let me put it this way. I believe in God, but I don't let that come in the way of my befriending an atheist. Okay? Befriending an atheist. I won't let it come in the way of my befriending an atheist. I will avoid discussion on God with that person because I know that that person and I will not to see eye to eye on the whole issue, on the whole issue of belief in God. So,
Sir, one more definition I can give is values are to preserve one's identity or religion or culture.
mm,
Because of that, one put values inherently.
okay,
I think. Hmm.
all right. So let's stop talking abstractly about values. Uh, let's give it a numerical value. How is a numerical value determined?
By preferences.
Who said that? Amulya, is it?
Yes, sir.
It is through preference.
Yes, sir. For so, for example, for book, I can give five values. Some other will give some other point.
Somebody is, please don't let music come in, then the video will get stopped. I won't be able to load it up. It'll become a copyright issue. Hmm. Uh, no, it is not by what I like. What I like, I value more, maybe, yes, but that's not a numerical value. I value secularism. In my system of values, secularism and inclusion of all kinds of people. In my system of values, caste has no place. But that's not a numerical value. Other day we talked about surplus value. So how do you arrive at a value which is numerical?
which we represent through numbers.
Yeah, so how do you decide to give a certain numerical value to certain something? How do you do it?
Based on
Hearing
priorities.
Based on
Priorities.
priorities. Okay, which is more, what has more numerical value in the market, cashew nut or groundnut?
Cashew nut.
Cashew nut. Why?
Because the
demand is
production
more
is
and
less.
supply is less. Like
Sorry, because
demand demand is more and supply is less coming to
the
India.
demand is more and supply is less.
Ah.
Is it just that? Is it just that? I think
The amount of work that goes into produce it,
And
because it's hard to
it
harvest and
includes traveling.
mhm.
Somebody is saying.
Doesn't it include one's taste buds? Hmm? I will be
yes, sir.
willing to pay more for cashew nuts because I like eating cashew nuts, let's say. So even that has to be factored in, isn't it? So that
Yes,
drives
sir.
demand. The fact that people prefer eating cashew nuts to ground nuts is the prime driver of demand for cashew nuts. Okay. So a value is something when you attach a value numerically to a particular commodity, then what does it denote? Hmm? All
It's
economists,
worth, sir.
Sir,
it's
it never
worth.
changes, sir. A numerical value never changes. It is absolute one for everyone.
No. What does it denote? That cashew nuts will always be, even in inflation, when prices are going up, the distance between cashew nut and ground nut will always be there. So what that does indicate a higher numerical value attached to one particular commodity, anything, it may be anything. Okay.
It
What
is
does it?
valuable.
Sorry,
It is valuable.
it's valuable.
Yes.
No, it is obviously valuable, but what else does it denote? This is the word for it. Dearness. Priority to the commodity. That's what Samya said.
Demand.
Hmm?
Demand. Demand decides price.
No, that is okay. Demand. So once you have established it, that something has higher demand, what does that mean? It means that something is held dearly. Dearness. Why do you say so and so is a dear friend of mine? Have you never
Because he
used
like
that in that way? Somebody is a dear friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine.
attachment, sir.
Not just attachment, it
Similar
shows,
taste.
no, it shows dearness is what indicates something that is important to you, irrespective of the reason. Dearness is that which is important to you, right? So when you attach or something which is a commodity, which has a higher numerical value attached to it, shows that that particular product basically enjoys greater dearness. Now, dearness can be also for other reasons, not just that, you like something. Like, for instance, if you take saffron, zafran, the word which is the source for the English word saffron. I'm not talking about the color, I'm talking about that particular thing called zafran. Zafran is very, very rare. It is not something that you can find easily. And because you can't find it easily, the dearness factor of Zafran will go up. It will automatically go up because you won't find it as much as you would want it in the quantities that you want it. For a drug addict, heroin or cocaine or LSD, they are very, very dear. They will pay. If you're an addict, you will pay any amount of money to get it. And that's why in America, most murders and all these things, thefts, are committed by drug addicts who can't kick the habit. They need the money and therefore they are into all kinds of fraudulent activity, including criminal activities, which are like murder, blackmail, all these things. So a numerical value, a high numerical value, basically shows that that particular commodity is very, very dear to many people and not available as much as people would want it to be. So when you put a numerical value to it to define what is a value becomes easy. When you start putting numerical values, numbers to a value, then it is easy to understand what that value is. But if I say I value secularism, then that becomes a philosophical value on which I cannot put a numerical, or rather I cannot put a number. I cannot put a number on that because that is something which is not in the nature of a commodity, which can be quantitatively valuated, cannot be quantitatively evaluated. As long as it is a quality, then it escapes. It escapes being something that lends itself to putting a number on. And when you can't put a number on something, then that value will not be seen as universal. It will not be seen as universal. It will be seen as something which is perhaps prejudicial. We are back to that word. Or we come to this thing called bias. Now, I spoke to you about Telangana, the identity. Okay. Now you can also speak about the Indian identity, right? And if you look at Gandhi, Gandhi wasn't very keen on Indian identity. Though he's the one who created the Indian identity, he was not very keen on the creation of the Indian nation state as we have it today. He saw this as, and very correctly, as a result of the processes of Western capitalism. And so when he talked about Swaraj, he talked about it as Gram Swaraj. And if you read Gandhi carefully, you will see that Gandhi said, India lives in its villages and the panchayat system that survived for centuries, even when the country was under rule of invaders, he said that should be the system that we should have. The panchayat system that he spoke about is not the panchayat raj system that we have today. It's not that. If you want to understand the panchayat system that Gandhi wanted to have, please read this novel, Panch Parameshwar. It is now, it's by Munshi Premchand, and it's now available in English, so you can read it. Or read Kantapura, written in English by Raja Rao. Okay, then you'll understand what it is that Gandhi is talking about when he talked about Gram Swaraj and Panchayat. That is what he wanted when India became independent. But Gandhi was also not somebody who imposed his views. He said, if you want to go this way, go this way. He also wanted to disband the Congress, by the way. He said once the Congress was there basically to fight for freedom. Now that we've got freedom, let's have a level playing ground. Let's get rid of this party and let new political parties come in so that people have a right to choose instead of, otherwise people will keep choosing this party because of its legacy. And that, he said, is detrimental to those people who might not subscribe to the Congress's values. So he said, get rid of the Congress, dissolve it. And I keep telling you that Nehru is not Gandhi's stooge. Okay? Nehru differed entirely from Gandhi. He didn't see development in Gandhian terms. Gandhi didn't even want railways. He wanted Gram Swaraj in such a way that each village will become a self-sufficient unit. No need to travel. He wanted to build human solidarities in human communities within villages. That was Gram Swaraj. And Gram is a village, that is Swaraj is its ruling itself. He didn't want the central government and all that. On the other hand, Nehru didn't want Gram Swaraj. He was not a supporter of the rural civilization. He wanted modernity. He wanted socialism, Fabian socialism, albeit not Marxist. And he was somebody who also did not subscribe to the idea of the nation state. He only saw the nation state as a step towards the establishment of a global community. And that is the reason why he said, we will not move out of the Commonwealth. That was debated, by the way. Okay. Should India remain in the Commonwealth? The Commonwealth is now notional. And the moment we became independent, being a part of the Commonwealth would be notional. And Nehru's argument, and he was not alone, there were some supporters of his, they supported the idea of remaining in the Commonwealth because it is something, ultimately it is something which is leading to the creation of a larger political community. Nehru wanted globalism. Gandhi wanted not globalism but Gram Swaraj. They didn't see eye to eye. Nehru wanted industrialization. Gandhi wanted artisan economy, not industrialization. Artisan and agricultural economy. You know who artisans are. Artisans are those who make, people like carpenters, potters, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, all those. He wanted an artisan, cottage industries as we call them in India. He wanted cottage industries to flourish. He was an anti-railways because he thought that railways can be one way of taking problems of one place to another place, which is what is happening with the global pandemic today. Okay, nothing stops at one place. Though we haven't had a global citizen, though we haven't had global governance, we do talk about global commons and we do talk about a global economy and we talk about global pandemics. A pandemic is global, but so global epidemics. So they didn't see eye to eye. So that's a bit of myth. Now, another person who didn't support the nation state in India was Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore also supported the idea of one world of human beings. He didn't support nation state system. Rabindranath Tagore didn't support the nation state system at all. In fact, he was a reluctant participant in the Indian struggle for independence because he said this will culminate in a nation state. Why should we not have some other form of struggle where we can have a global community? Okay, so these are values, qualitative values. You can't put a numerical, rather, you can't put a number to those values. You can't put a number to those values. And therefore, Mr. Comte wanted the elimination of values and only wanted facts. Facts which could be proven, which could be established, proven, verified, and predict. So, objectivity for him consisted only of facts, not of value. So he had this fact value dichotomy. He said, get rid of values. They bring indefiniteness. History, philosophy, all these are subjects steeped in values. So just get rid of them, please. That's what he said. But Max Weber said, you can't get rid of all kinds of values. He said, value orientation is unavoidable, but value judgment is avoidable. Now, how many of you think that this is a tenable statement? That value orientation is unavoidable, but value judgment is avoidable. How many of you think that this is possible? Hmm? Value orientation, according to Max Weber, is unavoidable for the simple reason that if you don't have something to work towards, what will you work towards? You have to value something and work to realize that. So let's come back to our freedom movement. We valued independence from the British. We valued governing ourselves. We valued the freedom that came with independence. So the Indian movement for independence is very rarely referred to as Indian independence struggle. It is always referred to freedom struggle. Freedom struggle. Even that book that Larry Collins and Dominic Lapierre wrote is called Freedom at Midnight, not Independence at Midnight. A book that influenced me so much. I've been looking for it. I found another copy. I'm so happy. I'm so happy because I can read it again. I've actually got it. So we call it freedom struggle. We don't call struggle independence struggle. So freedom is a value. It's an orientation for which people fought. People gave up their lives saying that it's okay, I don't have freedom, but at least let my progeny, my children, my grandchildren, let them have freedom. So that's a value. Have any of you seen this film called Saving Private Ryan by Steven Spielberg? If you haven't, please pull it out. If you have either Netflix or Prime Video, and if you don't find it there, pull it out from YouTube and see that film. Okay, it's set in the Second World War. I won't tell you the story so that you see it. It's a very sad film. It was one of those films, this has happened to me a couple of times, and both times with Tom Hanks's films. I am a huge, literally, huge fan of Tom Hanks. I saw Philadelphia in Sangeet Theatre, which is not there anymore. I saw Saving Private Ryan there. And at the end, I was hoping that the lights wouldn't come on because I was fighting tears. I was really fighting tears, both in Philadelphia, and even now I listen to that song, Philadelphia by Neil Young. Even listening to it brings tears to my eyes. Neil Young sang it so beautifully, that particular song. You can find it on YouTube. Listen to it. It's there with lyrics. I was fighting tears and I just sat like that, so that people don't see. And usually in Hyderabad, as soon as the lights are put, people start walking out. But I saw there were so many other people sitting like that. And when Steven Spielberg was asked why he made that movie, Saving Private Ryan, he said, today's generation takes the sacrifices of our posterity for granted. We are not even aware of it. We don't know the grounds on which today's levels of affluence, comfort, all of these have come on what grounds? They have come on the grounds of sacrifice. So he said, I wanted to remind people, look, these are not your entitlements. They are not your entitlements. It's because of the sacrifices that people made that you have what you have today. That's what I wanted to tell people, is what Steven Spielberg said. And I agree with him. Today's generation knows nothing about our history. History is getting mythified on a daily basis by different kinds of people in different ways. Great people are shown as jokers, villains, horrendous people. All this is happening around. It's very unfortunate. So, if people didn't value freedom, would they have given up their lives in order to fight for it. That's a value orientation. That's what Max Weber says. But he says you can avoid value judgments. I humbly differ. You can't have an orientation without a judgment. Unless you believe that being free is better than being unfree, unless you believe that let me give up my life so that at least the generations that come in the future will have what I don't have, what is that? That's a judgment to give up your life. You have decided that your life is worth giving up for the sake of the freedom that your children can enjoy. So, why avoid value judgments? What's wrong? There's nothing wrong. What were one's values will become facts. India and Indians wanting freedom was a value. Their getting it is a fact. So is the dichotomy tenable? It's not. It's not. Facts don't create themselves. Let me quote Einstein. Einstein said, if I had known that what I used in my research for physics would culminate in the manufacture and dropping of atom bombs on Japan, if I knew that would happen, then I would not have made my research public. So, who sets the agenda for science? Does science set an agenda for itself? Scientific method you're talking about, does it set an agenda for yourself, for itself? Who sets the agenda for it? Now, atomic energy can be used for peaceful purposes, can be used for destructive purposes. Does science determine by itself that it will be used for peaceful purposes? Manmohan Singh, a great man who everybody thinks is a joker, he insisted on that 1, 2, 3 nuclear agreement with America. He said, I'll resign as PM if this agreement is not allowed to pass. Why? Because he believed that we needed energy security and we cannot rely on thermal energy alone. We don't have enough water to supplement thermal energy with hydro electricity. or hydro energy. So he said we need nuclear fuel, we need nuclear technology, and America, he made America trust India that it won't use nuclear technology for weapons. The fact that the world agreed, only Australia said we won't supply nuclear fuel to India because we don't have adequate uranium resources. We need uranium. We don't have enough of them. We have to depend on other parts of the world. But APJ Abdul Kalam, another great man, he said, Indian scientists setting agenda. Indian scientists should learn to generate nuclear energy from thorium because we have an abundance of thorium. He said all research should now focus upon generation of nuclear energy from thorium rather than uranium. So again, it's a person, people setting agendas for science. So what is the scientific method? It is the creation of people. It is based in the values of people, whether you want to use it for peaceful purposes, whether you want to use something for war, it's all in the hands of people and their judgments and their orientations of values. So, objective knowledge, which eliminates the subject, nope, there is no such thing. Karl Marx, I'm just going to end with this point. That is why he was accused by Habermas to be nothing but a positivist. Karl Marx had great faith in the scientific civilization. Karl Marx said that if you want to understand human history, then you have to He said if you want to have a proper, unbiased, unprejudiced understanding of human history, then you have to rely on objective material conditions and not on the human being. Because he said all history is written from the point of view of the powerful people. He said that. So if you want to understand the actual history, if you want to understand what actually happened in history, okay, then you have to rely on objective material conditions. And that's why he called it historical materialism. By the way, I reiterate again, he never used the expression dialectical materialism. He didn't. He didn't. That is Engels. So, objective material conditions. So, what is he planning to do? He's trying to remove the human subject from history in order to understand the history of the human being. Can you see what he's doing here? He's removing the primary subject whose history you're trying to understand from your understanding of history. By saying that you have to rely on objective material conditions and not upon the human being in order to understand human history, you are this is what is actually called an epistemological break. What is an epistemological break? An epistemological break is removing from your understanding the very thing that you are trying to understand. If you're trying to understand human history, how can you remove the human being from out of it? That is why Habermas, sympathetic to the idea of the general idea of Marxism, is scathingly critical of Marx. And he says Marx is a glorified positivist, nothing more. And he accuses him of scientism, a term that I will discuss later, not now. So, this whole idea of objective knowledge, where you remove the perceiving subject, is nothing but teapot whimsy. You can't have objective knowledge without having the subject. That is the reason why positivism failed miserably. Tomorrow, when we meet, and that is also the reason why Marx failed miserably. Tomorrow, I will quickly run through two people, Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn. Karl Popper's ideas are contradicted by Thomas Kuhn, who in his essay, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, makes the point that there is a philosophy of science as well as a history of science. So that won't take, hopefully, too much time. And once we establish that, actually, I'll do one thing. I'll leave Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn for later when I do logical positivism. Uh, Tomorrow, let me do the hermeneutics. How hermeneutics came up as an alternative to positivism when positivism fell flat on its face. Okay? And how it replaced the notion of objectivity and objective knowledge with what it called intersubjectivity. So tomorrow we'll do hermeneutics. Later on we'll do logical positivism, and when we do that we'll do Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn. Okay, this should all have been a part of your syllabus. Really, there should have been a paper called Political Analysis which deals with all these things. But unfortunately, we have papers that deal with Yogi Vemana. I'm not looking down on him. I'm not looking down on him. But come on, why are we teaching him in political science? Yogi Vemana, Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti, Kabir Das, Nammalwar. Why are we dealing with these people?
Patriotism.
Hmm?
Patriotism.
Patriotism. You mean to say that this is patriotism?
Yes, sir.
I don't think so. It's not patriotism. They're not political thinkers. Why are you studying them as political thinkers? It says Indian political thought. Where is political thought in Yogi Vemana? He was a moral person. Nammalwar was an Alvar, part of the Bhakti movement. Why are we studying Nammalwar, Bhakti movement? Why? Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti, Sufi movement. Why? What is political about it? That's not patriotic. At least not my idea of patriotic. Those should be offered as optionals, if at all, not as compulsory papers. They have no bearing for your understanding of political science, politics of any country, including India. No bearing. Anyway, but like I always tell people, free country, anyone can have any opinion. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. We start with hermeneutics,
Thank you,
which
sir.
which is a part of your MA syllabus, part of the first unit. the interpretative method. That's hermeneutics. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.